Hello to you all and welcome to another instalment of the PitCast by us here at the Pit Crew Online, from the fans for the fans. And you know what? It's been an absolutely unreal roller coaster of a ride of a Grand Prix this weekend, because you all know why, and we're going to discuss the hot topics of the Italian Grand Prix. But I'm your host, Adam Wheeler, your resident IndyCar editor at the Pit Crew Online, and joining me to discuss all the hot topics of this weekend are three magnificent guests, one of which is, of course, James, our F2 and F3 editor, who's returning after a couple of weeks off. How you doing, man?
Hi, Adam. I could not miss this podcast today, could I? Today of all days.
No, you couldn't, honestly. I think all of us here knows why, and I'm sure he's very excited to discuss a certain someone, but I'll leave that just to percolate. I know James he's ready. Of course, next to James, because we've got this lovely little sort of immersive view on our Zoom windows, we've got Aaron, our BTCC editor. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, not too bad. As soon as I saw the race yesterday anyway, to be one of the first to volunteer and get into the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, literally the WhatsApp group just kind of exploded, didn't it? It was everyone was like, me. I was like, we can't have 5-6 people, guys. Come on, usually it's the struggle trying to find people, but we finally got at least a good amount of people on this one, so thank goodness. And now we're moving on to Chris, our resident stat man. How you doing, man?
I'm not too bad. It was a very eventful weekend for F2s. Nice to see them back as well, and of course F1 alike. Love to see that back, and obviously IndyCar as well.
Oh, well, I mean, that was another race altogether, but I could talk about that for a whole podcast. Maybe we should do an IndyCar podcast, guys. Who knows? But let's just move straight on into it, because we've got so much to talk about. So before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, please like this video and subscribe, whether you're viewing this on YouTube or Spotify, and comment below if you have an opinion on what we're discussing today. But if we just go straight into it, let's kind of touch on the first thing we kind of need to talk about, which is, it was a slightly, some would argue, dull Saturday, which was rectified by an eventful and brilliant Sunday of racing, where, of course, Ricardo and Mclaren returned to winning ways at the Italian Grand Prix. How do you feel about that, James Matthews?
I've barely come down since. Honestly, if I just start personally, I don't think I've been that pleased with the Grand Prix result since maybe the first race I watched, which was Canada 2011. It was incredible. As a DannyRic fan and a McLaren fan, that was always going to be a great result. But, when you weigh in the fact that McLaren hasn't won since 2012 and DannyRic hasn't won for 3 years, and he's had the slump he's had this year, it was just such a good result. I was so happy for both of them. I think it's one of those podiums as well where even if you're not a DannyRic fan or a McLaren fan, you're still happy to see it happen.
Yeah. Did you have anything to drink that night, James?
I may have had a few to drink last night. It's been a gentle 24 hours since.
You've got to, though. You've got to. It's been a hard slog of a year or two. And now, you deserve it.
Celebrating Emma Raducanu the night before as well, and then DannyRic. What else was I going to do with my Sunday night? Exactly.
I mean, Aaron, how did you? What were you thinking during the race? What were you thinking after the race? Just give us your thoughts.
Like James, I've only just come down from it. We were screaming at the TV when Ricardo came over the line, and then Lando came in P2. It's first 1-2 since 2010. And as a big McLaren fan, I've endured the lows to get to these highs. It's I've not been that excited for a long time, probably since Jenson Button was about. To see DannyRic come over the line first for McLaren, it's a dream come true, really, for McLaren.
I mean, a lot of us were just sort of, I know I was kind of just sitting there thinking, is he going to do this? Is he going to do this? Because we've just grown accustomed to things almost going our way and then just falling short. I mean, last year I was sitting here wanting Carlos Sainz to win the Italian Grand Prix into the last lap, but this year they finally did it and McLaren got the win. And it was just so good to see. It was so good to see Zach Brown doing a shoey as well. How good was that? But Chris, go on, man. Let's hear your thoughts on the race.
Well, you got to think, lap 32, lap 33, Norris said pick up the pace. It's like, well, is Norris going to, he hasn't won a race yet. Is he going to take Ricardo out? And is Bottas going to weave from last to first? No, but 5-6 years ago, McLaren wouldn't even do a lap round Italy with the Honda engine. So it's the old guards coming back. Williams on the podium 2 races ago, and now McLaren winning again. So when are Ferrari going to win then?
I mean, it's interesting you say that, Chris, because I guess when we think about it, the last 2 seasons, we've had an Alpine, we've had a Racing Point, we've had a McLaren and an AlphaTauri win a race in Formula One, but not Ferrari. Very interesting. It might even be that Williams wins a race before Ferrari at this rate.
I don't know if your nerves could cope with Carlos Sainz leading a race for Ferrari, could they?
No. I think I would be like what James was yesterday, just a ridiculous mess. It would be horrific. You wouldn't want to see me that day. But I mean, James, this is an absolutely astonishing rise to, from the doldrums of where they were a couple of years ago to suddenly winning a race. And you have to say on merit, don't you? This is a great sign for the long-term future of McLaren. And it's made all of the work that they've put in over the years to restructure and put in the people in place to change that team from the ground up vindicated. And here they are with a win.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Aaron said, they've gone through such lows over the last few years to get to this point. And as you said, it was completely on merit. It wasn't one of those races where they were sort of hanging around 4th and 5th and then the leaders skittled off or had engine problems or whatever. Ricardo qualified on the front row. He took the lead into the first corner and stayed there pretty much for the whole race. This was entirely because they had the fastest car on that day. And the fact that Norris was there in P2 as well, they took that race and they won it. It's a great sign of things to come, I think. And we probably all came into the season thinking they're going to be on the podium this year. Are they going to perhaps be able to take a win? Yeah, you've got to think that team is going somewhere next year, surely, with the regulations coming in, with this momentum behind them, with Zach Brown at the helm and Andreas Seidel and all the new stuff that's coming in. I think they've got a new wind tunnel and everything. They've got to be taking another step forward next year, surely.
Yeah. So it's really exciting times if you're a McLaren fan, I think. And Aaron, thinking personally or more specifically at Daniel Ricciardo's performances, first half of the season, we were all thinking, where is he? And where has his pace gone in relation to Lando Norris? I think there was that race 3 or 4 races ago where he just sat there on one of his tyres once he got out of the monocoque and just sat there contemplating, what is going on. And it's just an astonishing turnaround.
Yeah, Ricardo is a weird one. He's not really shone much since, he left Red Bull. Renault, it never quite clicked for him. I know he got the podium in last year, but it never quite clicked. And then, like he said himself, he's been sandbagging all season. Bluff or what, but, he said he's been sandbagging. But yeah, it's finally clicked for him. We've all been saying for months, it'll click, he'll come good eventually. And we've all been vindicated, and he actually has. And what's weird is I was listening to one of the season previews that we did earlier, just to see what I did say, because I'm pretty sure I said McLaren would win a race this year.
Did you really?
As one of them, at the end of throwaway, outlandish, crazy predictions, I'm pretty sure I said, McLaren would sneak a race win in there.
My goodness. That's absolutely incredible. I think I can't remember what I said for our predictions. I'm pretty sure we were all saying McLaren would do something and build on their P3 in the constructors, but I don't think anyone really realistically thought here we'd be sitting here talking about a 1-2, let alone, it's just incredible. Chris, can we expect, what can we expect from McLaren in the future? Can we see any repeated success this season? But specifically going into 2022, what do you see of their hopes?
They'll probably build on the fact they've still got the Mercedes partnership, so the engine is strong with their new development and new regulations. They can build upon that. They've got their development now. Norris is going into his 4th season. Quote me if I'm wrong. So he's not a rookie anymore. And Ricardo, well, he's settled in now. So they'll have a good partnership together. Always the jokers. And they put their action behind and go for it, really. I reckon 2nd in constructors next year.
Hard to argue with that. And you have to think that they're nailed on for P3 in the constructors now, Chris, because what was the weakest link in that chain was obviously Ricardo from portion of that season, but with both of them consistently performing now, there's nothing to stop them from getting that P3 now, surely.
Yeah, there's mistakes in the Ferrari team. I mean, Saturday morning you always have one of them in the wall. So sorry, Adam. And then
it's okay. I'll just go cry in a second.
With race today, it was pretty much faultless. There wasn't a mistake. You had sort of lockups from Verstappen, you had lockups from Hamilton, and Ricardo didn't do a single thing wrong. I mean, the pit stops were faults with McLaren recently. There wasn't a single error from either of them.
Yeah, I mean, I know we could go on talking about this for absolutely ages. And I know James would love to go talking about this for absolutely ages because you've been waiting so long for this. But in fact, it wasn't the only talking point of the race. And we have to sort of get onto it, don't we, guys? It's coming.
We must.
Let's just get on our fence or get off the fence, whichever way we're going to be sitting on it. Yeah, we've got to start on or go on to the Hamilton and Verstappen collision, which happened on, of course, lap 26 after Hamilton pitted to cover Verstappen's slow pit stop, and then both of them ended up out of the race after Max sent a move down the inside of the chicane at turn 1. The stewards eventually would give Max a 3-grid place penalty for the next race at Sochi. So, can I get your guys' initial thoughts on the incident and, whether you thought the penalty was the right decision? Let's start with Aaron.
Sorry, hold on. I'm just going to climb out from under the bus you've just thrown me under.
We've got the weight of the motorsport world on you, Aaron. Be careful what you say.
I feel the pressure now. From me personally, I think it was a racing incident. I think I've said from the start you could find fault from both sides of it. You could blame Max for some things, you could blame Lewis for some things, which in my head is a racing incident. You're always going to get it with two drivers like Lewis and Max. You're going to get egos, they don't want to give way. And like Toto said, if Lewis got through there, odds are Max would struggle to get back past him. So, no, I think it was a racing incident. I think, there's fault on both sides and they should just, move on.
Yes, perfectly on the fence, Aaron. Brilliant.
I've got splinters, but yeah.
We've polished that fence for you. It's nice and clean. James, go on. What are your thoughts?
Well, I'm gonna sit up here on the fence next to my good friend Aaron. I can see why they gave Verstappen the penalty. When you read through the steward's wording, I think they were saying, Verstappen seemed to just come from too far back for there to really be a move. And I can understand that. But at the same time, it took both of them for that incident to happen. Either one of them could have backed out of there. Hamilton could have squeezed Verstappen less on the way into the corner. Verstappen could have backed out before they reached the middle of the chicane. But, neither of them chose to give up. And that's why they came together. It's funny when we did the Silverstone podcast, I think with Jess, and we talked about the collision. Then obviously we kind of said, it was inevitable they were going to come together at some point this season. And I think I felt the same thing with this, that after they'd come together that first time, it was inevitable that it was going to happen again. And Chris, I know you always say that things come in threes, so I would not be surprised if it happened another time this year. And I can kind of see if Interlagos goes ahead, like going through the Senna S's. But
oh god,
yeah. It is what it is.
It is what it is, exactly. I mean, personally speaking, I have an opinion on this, and I don't know whether I should really being the host, it feels a bit odd sort of putting my opinion out there, but my personal opinion on this is that I sort of agree with the penalty, and I agree with the statement that Verstappen was predominantly to blame in the incident. I think there's a number of reasons why I think that. And I may be completely wrong in this. And I have to sort of parentheses this with my opinion probably might not be right. And I'm wholly willing to probably backtrack on it at a later date. But in terms of the overtake itself, to me, it feels like Verstappen was extremely far back going into the braking point, not alongside him going into turn 1. Now, you may argue there that by the point he gets towards turn 2, so the point between turns 1 and turns 2, Max is somewhat alongside Hamilton. But for me personally, I don't think he's under braking. He's not alongside him, and therefore he hasn't earned the right to that corner quite as much as Lewis Hamilton has. Now, I know there is another argument to go there in terms of mentality of drivers, and in terms of if a certain driver has the capacity to be an aggressive overtaker like Max Verstappen, then you are prepared. You need to be prepared for him to do the lunge up turn 2 and give him enough space. I don't know if someone wants to come back on me with that and and shut me down, put me back on a fence.
I'll leave it to the Max fan in the room.
Well, first of all, God bless the Halo. Second of all, and it's just the fact that if the sausage curb weren't there, he wouldn't be all over the top of him. But yeah, with the incident, I thought it was 50-50 or 60-40 to Verstappen. But, you know, with incidents like that, it's a racing incident at the end of the day. Other people, drivers alike, Alonso thought it was, and 9 times out of 10 he's right. But if he gets a penalty, free place penalty, he might just take his engine penalty at Russia. So he might just go, well, I'll have to take my engine penalty sooner rather than later.
Chris, I wanted to ask you, seeing as though you're the Red Bull fan in the room, what do you think? Is there anything to these accusations of tactical foul play that have been aimed at Red Bull and Max Verstappen, specifically from Toto Wolff's side?
I think it was just heat at the moment. You know, that probably the win was there because they had fresh rubber against the McLaren, sorry, because they managed to get past Norris. So he probably thought the win was there, but I think it's just heat at the moment sort of situation.
Yeah, I don't quite buy the tactical foul accusations, James. What, you know, surely that's kind of like a baseless accusation to make.
Yeah, I was disappointed to hear Toto Wolff say that, especially after Silverstone. They put out that statement, didn't they, after the Red Bull appeal, saying that Red Bull had kind of implied Hamilton hit Verstappen on purpose and they were trying to tarnish his reputation, and very much taking that like moral high ground of this kind of personal attack wasn't okay. And I didn't think it was okay at the time for those comments of, you know, Hamilton's maybe being amateurish or sticking a wheel up the inside at cops. So it's disappointing to hear Toto Wolff come out with a very similar thing. And it might just be that I know I'm the only person here who's not a football fan, so maybe I just don't understand what a tactical foul is, but implying that there was anything kind of tactical about that, or it just seems so unnecessary. When you've got 2 drivers like this, that when they go wheel to wheel in tight situations like that, it feels almost inevitable they're going to come together because neither is going to yield that space. Every time that happens, you know, the team bosses, they'll rally around their drivers. I think we said this at the Silverstone podcast. They'll rally around their drivers and they'll protect their ego and say, you were 100% in the right. Whether you got a penalty or not, you were in the right. You don't need to change your position. The other person was wrong. There's nothing you need to do to change your approach. And then when you add on top of that, you've got them in the media saying, you know, implying intent from the other side. It's just adding unnecessary fuel to this. And I think it needs to stop. Toto Wolff and Christian Horner need to stop fighting Hamilton and Verstappen's battles in the media like this, because it's just going to fire them up on track unnecessarily. Like, you can argue that, you know, going into something like qualifying, for example, maybe it fires them up to get that extra 10th to get pole position. But when it adds this, that when they're wheel to wheel and they think, you know, there's some kind of personal vendetta or a point to prove, you end up with these horrible accidents that no one wants to see, where you end up with Max Verstappen smashing into the wall at cops at high speed, or, you know, a wheel of a Red Bull coming down on Hamilton's head in the gravel trap. We don't want to see it. We don't need to see this.
It's certainly inflammatory, and we'll throw it out there that there's been some quite nasty sort of stuff put out on social media over the past couple of, the past day or so, ever since. Aaron, what do you think?
Like James says, you know, it's this tribalism, this, you know, rallying around the driver 100%. It's something I don't agree with. I think if someone's messed up, they need to kind of say, look, you've messed up. You need to just learn from it, because saying you're not in the wrong all the time, it's like saying it to a kid. You just encourage more, you know, not bad behaviour as such, but you encourage more of this arrogance and I'm in the right 100%. No, even if I've been him off, I'm in the right. He made contact with my car, you know, kind of thing. It's a dangerous game to play, I think.
Aaron, I'm going to throw this out to you. Going off that assumption, does the argument that kind of dubbing things racing incidents all the time then necessitate that no driver eventually ever takes blame for an incident, and therefore nobody ever learns from an incident?
You're just trying to get me off this fence, aren't you? I mean, yeah, to an extent. You know, you need to apportion blame when there is blame. You know, it's easy to dub it off as a racing incident, but most of the time, I just believe that they are. You know, if you can find faults from both sides, that's where I see it. If, you know, as a racing incident.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of brought that up in a way because, I mean, I wondered if this is almost like a result, really, of sort of like this driving culture, pretty much since I think a precedent set around the Austrian Grand Prix in around 2019 after Leclerc and Verstappen incident. It seems like ever since, kind of, incidents where both drivers don't really leave each other room are sort of passed off as racing incidents, and ever since, a lot of drivers, they've kind of got away with it in a way. And I just wonder, where the future lies, really. I mean, I suppose after Silverstone and Monza, the stewards have actually awarded penalties, albeit whether that's kind of, a time penalty or a grid place penalty, consequentially as, for some of these incidents. So I guess there is a precedent being set. But yeah, I mean, James, how do you see this going forward?
Trying to marshal my thoughts here.
We'll get you off the fence in a second. Don't worry.
Yeah, definitely.
Come down.
I think in terms of like just picking up on the thought of like if it's a racing incident, does that absolve everyone of blame? I think maybe I'm just being semantic here, but a racing incident is not necessarily a racing accident. It's like that. What's it in Hot Fuzz where they say they don't call them road traffic accidents anymore because it implies there's no one to blame. An incident, even if it's both are to blame, they're still both responsible. But then the stewards aren't necessarily going to penalise both drivers if they can find someone who's predominantly to blame. I did wonder, to be honest, if in a situation like this, if they say, for example, Verstappen is 60% to blame, they could give him the grid penalty and the penalty points, but also give Hamilton penalty points for his 40% side of it. I don't know if that's perhaps, I don't know. I think every time a big incident happens, we always go down the route of like, how can we change the rules in the penalty system? And sometimes it's a bit of a knee-jerk reaction and it's not needed, but I don't know. I don't know. I just don't want to see it happen again, but I know it's going to.
I don't think any of us do, and I think that it's certainly not enjoyable seeing these kind of accidents happen, and potentially the lives of two drivers endangered in both incidents is something that none of us ever want to see. Thank goodness for the halo in both.
And I wonder on the thing of like deterring drivers from doing it, like Hamilton's penalty in Silverstone, for example, is not going to be much of a deterrent because he still managed to outrace 30 seconds in the end and win the race. And Verstappen's is probably not going to be that much of a deterrent because, as Chris alluded to, they were likely going to take his engine change penalty in Sochi anyway. So it's kind of 3 places on top of what would have been 20 odd places. So I don't know if it's going to stop them doing this in the future, but then I don't know what would really.
It almost feels like them both need to have a sort of quiet, informal chat and sort of talk about these sort of informal rules of engagement that either one needs to have if they're going to be going into these incidents again, whether that's facilitated by them or it's brought on by external people. I don't quite know, but it seems like, I don't know, being cynical here, it just feels like this is kind of forecast to keep happening all the way up until the title decider, if the title's that close, come Abu Dhabi. And I suppose that in a way that's sort of part of racing, and I think it's always been part of racing, as we've seen with so many different championship fights with some of the greats of the sport. But yes, it doesn't make for great viewing sometimes. Chris, how do you see this going forward, and do you see any solution to this?
Well, it's people call him Crashtappen. That's the one thing that really nerks me. It's his first penalty points for anything regarding it. So
that's true.
People call him, he's always involved in crashes. Not really. Hypothetically, he's one of the cleanest on the grid if you go to penalty ratings and details like that. It's going to happen again, possibly, as I allude to, it happens in Prix. But who says it's going to happen this season? They may be involved in championship battles in the future. But here's one for you. First time since Verstappen's debut, both him and Hamilton have retired in the same race.
Wow. Very interesting. I find that very surprising.
Yeah.
Really?
Hamilton doesn't retire often.
I suppose I just kind of want to kind of wrap up on, I know we've kind of slightly touched on it in one of our previous points, but I think I'm just going to finish off with Aaron here. I mean, how much more praise can we kind of heap on the safety advancements in Formula One over the past couple of years? Seeing that tyre go down kind of above Hamilton's head was horrific, to say the least. I mean, it really did make you think, what would have happened had that not been there. And yeah, I mean, potentially another driver's life saved going off from last year. Maybe 2 drivers' lives have been saved in the space of 2 seasons of Formula One.
Yeah, it's obviously all the safety advancements that have been going on for years, not just over the last 2 years with the Halo. There's been, Hans device, there's been the fireproof suits, all the way Sid Watkins started, and he's kept going on now by, Alan van der Merwe and Ian Richards and everyone else at the FIA. You've seen so many lives saved, like the crash at Spa with Jack Aitken. You've seen, the Halo saved Hamilton there yesterday, and Grosjean was saved in Bahrain. So, yeah, it's incredible.
Well, then, I think we'll just we'll have to wrap it up there because we're closing up on the time we have for the pitcast. But let us know what you guys think. Let us know what you all think about the Hamilton and Verstappen crash, whether you thought it was a racing incident and whether you thought the penalty was necessary. But to bring it back to a more lighter note, because I know everyone wants to be picked up at the end of this podcast, let us know what you think about the DannyRic win and about McLaren's return to winning ways after almost a decade in Formula One. Where do you think they can go on to in 2022 and their personal hopes for the end of the Constructors' Championship this year as well? If you have any thoughts, let us know in the comment section below on this video or on any of our posts on social media. But thank you all for listening. And if you enjoyed this and you want to find out more of our content, make sure to like and subscribe and look out for us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or visit our website at www.thepitcrewonline.net. But thank you all. James, shall we do our routine social media handles?
I think it's social media time.
I think it is. So, James, where can our listeners find you on social media?
I'm on Twitter at James16Matthews for all Daniel Ricardo hype.
And Chris?
And you can catch me at C_Lordy91, and Lando's going to win before Russell. That's my prediction.
Okay, but mic drop. Just leave that there at the end. My goodness. Aaron, your Twitter handle and any other crazy predictions you've got.
My Twitter handle is at AaronAirwin7. In terms of crazy predictions, I ain't really got any. Man was McLaren would win a race, and it's come true. So I'm manifesting my George Russell energy now.
There you go then. And my Twitter handle is Wheeler_deals. But that's it for another episode of The Pitcast. So there's nothing left to say, but as always, we will see you out on track.